Welcome to Tradition and Sanity, the Novus Ordo Rite of Marriage, revisiting the eldest child of the Reform, part 1 of a 2-part series by Anthony Jones. The accidental features of a rite invite us into its sacramental depths. The post-conciliar reformers made several changes to the accidents of the rite of marriage, de-emphasizing, among other things, the legal reality of the sacrament and its primary procreative purpose. In the Second Vatican Council's Constitution on the Liturgy, Sacrosanctum Concilium, 3 paragraphs are devoted to marriage. The section begins by declaring that the rite of celebrating marriage in the Roman Book of Rites is to be revised and made richer in such a way that it will express the grace of the sacrament more clearly and emphasize the duties of wife and husband. Similar to the document's proposed reform of the Roman Mass, the vagueness of this sentence opened up the traditional Roman rite of marriage to an indefinite amount of change. A priest was still required to, quote, ask for and obtain the consent of the parties contracting the marriage, end quote, but nothing else was obviously off the table. Before the council was over, the Vatican would publicly issue 2 documents with further instructions for the revision of the rite, but neither of them offered any more clarity on how far-reaching those changes could be. The decree of transformation was left up to the commission known as the Consilium, in consultation with Pope Paul VI. Groups 22 and 23 of the Consilium were tasked with crafting a new rite of marriage, which they did in just 2 years, from 1966 to 1968. By the end of the process, it had changed so much that Archbishop Annibale Bugnini, whom Paul VI appointed secretary of the Consilium, felt justified in calling it a firstborn, quote-unquote. This was in part because of all the sacraments that the Consilium operated on, it was, quote, the first to be studied and the very first to be published, end quote. However, it is striking that in describing the new rite, Bugnini did not choose to use a word associated with organic development. Instead, the word firstborn suggests that the post-conciliar rite of marriage, and by extension the siblings that would follow it corresponding to the other 6 sacraments, was their own intellectual offspring, a new being. Lest anyone suspect me of reading too much into a single word, I will let Bugnini speak for himself. Indeed, this was not the first time the new rite's architect had described his project in radically innovative terms. In 1967, while the post-conciliar marriage rite was still taking shape, Bugnini bluntly revealed the perspective that would give birth to the entire reform. Quote, the liturgy is in the midst of a period of transition. It is not only a question of touching up a work of art of great value, but sometimes it is necessary to give new structures to entire rites. It is indeed a question of a fundamental restoration, I would almost say of a recasting, and for certain points, of an actual new creation. Why this fundamental work? Because the image of the liturgy given by the council is completely different from what it was before. End quote. Bugnini, suffice to say, was eager for the opportunity to recreate the Roman rite, and he justified his zeal by appealing to the often vague prescriptions for change in Sacrosanctum Concilium, the drafting committee of which he had steered prior to the council. On the other hand, Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger lamented the approach described above, insofar as it was also applied to the new Missal, and by extension, the new Rituale, which was produced by the same commission and included the new rite of marriage. He expressed his dismay on multiple occasions, and tried to correct the conciliar narrative Bugnini had asserted. Quote, the problem of the new Missal lies in its abandonment of a historical process that was always continual, before and after St. Pius V, and in the creation of a completely new book, although it was compiled of old material, the publication of which was accompanied by a prohibition of all that came before it, which, besides, is unheard of in the history of both law and liturgy. And I can say with certainty, based on my knowledge of the conciliar debates and my repeated reading of the speeches made by the Council Fathers, that this does not correspond to the intentions of the Second Vatican Council. In another quote, he mentions, the new Missal was published as if it were a book put together by professors, not a phase in a continual growth process. Such a thing has never happened before. It is absolutely contrary to the laws of liturgical growth, and it has resulted in the nonsensical notion that Trent and Pius V produced a missal 400 years ago. The Catholic liturgy was thus reduced to the level of a mere product of modern times." End quote. It is one thing to read such a judgment from an eminent liturgical scholar who would become Pope Benedict XVI, but it is quite another to see the liturgical reduction unfold before one's own eyes. Lived experience is one way to gain that vision. A close examination of the historical record is another. A renaissance of Catholic publishing in recent decades has shed needed light on the differences between the preconciliar and the postconciliar sacraments of the Roman Rite, helping young and old to understand what changed and why. Most importantly, these resources have drawn people into a deeper appreciation of their liturgical inheritance and love for Christ. The present essay aims to contribute to that growing literature, specifically with reference to the rite of marriage. In a letter dated March 17, 1969, Pope Paul VI set the date for the promulgation of the new rite of marriage and expressed his, quote, hopes that when explained in suitable instructions, it will help spouses better to understand the profound meaning, the inexhaustible spiritual riches, and the serious obligations of Christian marriage, end quote. Suitable instructions, as many Catholic spouses can attest, are by no means guaranteed when a couple decides to marry within the Church. After all, some priests, marriage prep programs, or books on marriage are less suitable than others. Moreover, even the best instruction can only supplement the rite of marriage itself, which has its own formative power. Thus, the text of that rite merits careful consideration, particularly for engaged Roman Rite couples with an important choice before them, to be wed using the Vetus Ordo, Old Order, rite of marriage, or the Novus Ordo, New Order one. Answering this question is made easier by examining the differences between those rites. This will shed light on whether the new rite truly helps spouses better understand the meaning, riches, and obligations of marriage. As a result, the degree to which the rite can facilitate their reception of sacramental grace, both on their wedding day and every day of their marriage, will come into focus. Preliminary notes. It is important to emphasize 2 points from the start. First, there is not one rite of marriage that is absolutely superior to all others. The Roman Rite is one of many rites in the Catholic Church, so marriage rituals that are very different from ours, such as the Byzantine mystery of crowning ceremony, can be just as venerable and in harmony with tradition. Furthermore, the rite of marriage has always been the sacrament most adaptable to local customs, as the Council of Trent made clear. This makes sense, as even before Christ elevated it to a sacramental level, marriage was, quote, the principle and foundation of domestic society, and therefore of all human association, end quote, in the words of Pope Pius XI. As a result, the Church recognizes the value of retaining its relation to social custom and leaves room for doing so in the rite's rubrics. However, the existence of legitimate liturgical diversity does not imply that all marriage rites are equal in every way. The second point worth mentioning is that since both a Vetus Ordo marriage and a Novus Ordo marriage are valid Catholic sacraments, assuming no canonical impediments to marriage exist, they both offer access to union with Christ, who is himself an infinite font of grace. In a certain sense, Christ is the substance of every sacrament. However, since God chose to convey the sacraments as material realities in accord with human nature, they involve certain accidents that comprise the rituals themselves and mediate that grace to human beings. This is where we must begin. Sacramental substance and accidents. In the material world, substance and accidents are always united, and, as Dr. Peter Kwasniewski notes, outside of the Holy Eucharist, we never get one apart from the other. In fact, we perceive substance through its accidents. Accidents are precisely what give us access to substance, purchase on it, insight into it, awareness of its depths, end quote. In the Summa Theologiae, St. Thomas Aquinas describes the intellect's power to, quote, read the interiors of things, end quote, on the basis of what the senses perceive. Quote, within the accidents lies hidden the substantial nature of the thing. Within words lie hidden the meanings of words. Within likenesses and symbols lies hidden the symbolized truth, and effects lie hidden in causes, and vice versa. End quote. Thus, as Dr. Kwasniewski puts it, the non-essential opens on to the essential. For this reason, that the externals are meant to tell us something about the reality to which they are in service, and draw us toward it, it is important that they harmonize with the interior. In other words, the surface should correspond to the thing's nature and lead us directly into it." End quote. This harmony between substance and accidents applies to the sacramental rites and affects the faithful, as is well attested by Catholic tradition. For instance, the Council of Trent proclaimed, "As human nature is such that it cannot easily raise itself up to the meditation of divine realities without external aids, Holy Mother Church has for that reason duly established certain rites, and has provided ceremonial such as symbolic blessings, lights, incense, vestments, and many other rituals of that kind from apostolic order and tradition, by which the majesty of this great sacrifice is enhanced, and the minds of the faithful are aroused by those visible signs of religious devotion to contemplation of the high mysteries hidden in it." Likewise, St. Thomas writes, "The human mind, in order to be united to God, needs to be guided by the sensible world, since invisible things are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, as the Apostle says in Romans 1:20. Wherefore, in the divine worship, it is necessary to make use of corporeal things, that man's mind may be aroused thereby, as by signs, to the spiritual acts by means of which he is united to God." End quote. Thus, the accidental features of a sacrament exist to facilitate the fruitful reception of the graces occasioned by that sacrament, all of which are ultimately ordered to union with Christ. It follows, then, that accidental features would facilitate that reception of graces and union with Christ to varying degree, according to the harmony of those features with the substance of the sacrament in question. This is not a matter of validity or liceity, but of fittingness, and to some extent of authenticity. Ritual differences considered. The question, then, can be helpfully narrowed. Compared to those in the old rite of marriage, are the accidental features introduced in the new rite more or less in harmony with the substance of marriage? The reform of the marriage rite affected every part of it, including its placement relative to the celebration of Mass, the official options for readings and prayers, and the text of the nuptial blessing, which was, quote, "the oldest and most continuously used blessing in Christendom," end quote, from before the 500s until it was redacted and recast in 1969. None of these changes are insignificant, and they deserve thorough examination, particularly by someone with an appreciation for the Vetus Ordo rite of marriage. But such a project would require a book-length treatment. My primary aim here will be much more modest, to examine the degree to which the solemn legal reality of marriage, together with its primary end, is communicated through the words of the rite. The limited scope of this essay thereby provides a window into some of the most significant changes to the rite, striking at the heart of the theology of the sacrament as well as human psychology. After all, the legal character of the sacrament pertains to its indissolubility, an aspect of one of the three fundamental goods or blessings of marriage, as outlined by the Catechism of the Council of Trent and Pope Pius XI. Let us briefly examine some of the most conspicuous changes, then review the Concilium's rationale undergirding them. First, consider the questioning prior to the marriage vows, in response to which the bridegroom and bride express their consent. In the Vetus Ordo rite, the priest separately asks both the bridegroom and bride, "Name. Do you take name, here present, for your lawful wife/husband, according to the rite of our Holy Mother the Church?" In the Novus Ordo questioning, the priest instead addresses them as a couple and asks, "Name and name. Have you come here to enter into marriage without coercion, freely and wholeheartedly? Are you prepared, as you follow the path of marriage, to love and honor each other for as long as you both shall live? Are you prepared to accept children lovingly from God and to bring them up according to the law of Christ and His Church?" As Graham points out, in addressing each person individually, the Vetus Ordo rite emphasizes their separateness prior to the completion of the sacrament, which will soon unite them as one flesh, a new mode of relation to one another, with a new set of obligations. Further, the word lawful and the unique reference to the rite of our Holy Mother, the Church, emphasizes the legally binding character of the marriage and the Church's authority to witness it. This fittingly corresponds to the rite that has just begun, wherein one man and one woman stand before the authority of the Church to enter sacramentally into a lawful, binding contract. At the questioning in the Novus Ordo rite, law and Church authority are only mentioned in the question that refers to raising children, which may be omitted if circumstances suggest this, for example, if the couple are advanced in years, as the new ritual says. The use of the word take in the Vetus Ordo rite, which reappears later in the vows of both old and new rites, also connotes binding oneself as in taking an oath, a reinforcement of the solemn legal character of the sacrament. The questioning at the beginning of the rite brings attention to the understanding of marriage conveyed by the rite in its entirety. As Dr. Michael Foley observes, the phrase referring to the rite of the Church in the Vetus Ordo prepares all who hear it for catechesis, since it, quote, implies that the whole service, not just the sermon, is designed to celebrate and teach the essence of marriage. After the exchange of rings, the Vetus Ordo rite revisits that essence with theological clarity and precision. The priest prays, "We beg you, Lord, to look on these your servants, and graciously to uphold the institution of marriage established by you for the continuation of the human race, so that they who have been joined together by your authority may remain faithful together by your help, through Christ our Lord." This rich prayer contains a treasure trove of insights. It acknowledges that the spouses are servants of the Lord before all else, that marriage is not a mere formality, but a venerable institution, that it comes into being between the spouses by divine authority, that their obligation to conjugal fidelity is lifelong, and that fulfilling this obligation is only possible with divine assistance. Many of those points reinforce the legally binding character of marriage, which we have already seen the rite keen on doing. While the prayer is evidently very rich in content, its unique value consists in its succinct statement of the primary purpose of the sacrament of marriage, the continuation of the human race, propagationem humani generis. There are, of course, additional purposes of marriage, which Pope Pius XI referred to as, quote, secondary ends, such as mutual aid, the cultivating of mutual love, and the quieting of concupiscence, whereby husband and wife are not forbidden to consider so long as they are subordinated to the primary end, end quote. In 1944, Pope Pius XII affirmed a decree requiring Catholics to profess that, quote, the primary end of marriage is the generation and education of children, and that secondary ends are essentially subordinate to the primary end, end quote. The ends of marriage are fundamental to the substance of the sacrament, and this prayer after the exchange of rings stands out for its bold reminder that procreation is at the top of that hierarchy, regardless of whether God blesses the spouses with children. Tragically, the prayer was completely deleted by the Consilium and does not have a replacement in the Novus Ordo rite of marriage. Its unique catechetical value disappeared along with it, despite some of its themes, such as the spouses as servants of God and the lifelong nature of marriage, appearing elsewhere in the new rite. Overall, with respect to both the solemn legal reality of marriage and the primary end of that union, the Vetus Ordo rite of marriage allows the characteristic substance of the sacrament to shine forth with greater clarity and precision than its post-conciliar counterpart. This leaves us with a troubling question. If the accidental features of the Vetus Ordo rite of marriage are in greater harmony with the substance of the sacrament, why did the members of the Consilium insist on its transformation? Answering that question and reflecting on how Catholics should respond will be our focus in Part 2. Thank you for listening. This is Anthony Jones, writing for Tradition and Sanity.